My name is Bruce Elson, and I was born in Pueblo in 1923 and have lived here all of my life except the years from 43 to 46 when I served in the military during World War II.
Now, we're here talking to you today because you had that unusual experience of you actually visited Hiroshima just a few months after the bomb was dropped in 1945. Can you tell us how did you get to Japan? What put you there?
Yes, I joined the 41st Infantry Division in Mindanao, at the city of Zamboanga, and we liberated that island of the Philippines, and then started training for the invasion of Japan, which was classified at that time, but later learned we were to land November 1, 1945. And we had no idea when we heard about the bomb what destruction it showed, because we never had seen anything that massive as destruction goes. And so we heard they dropped the bomb, and rather casually were glad that something happened like that. But then, of course, when we heard that that caused them to surrender, it was kind of dangerous to be we lived in tent city at that time, and kind of danger. Everybody was drinking all their beer rations and shooting, and so you kind of needed to stay low. You might be one of those friendly casualties. That's correct.
How did the 1st Division get up to Japan? When did you go up there?
Well, as soon as they surrendered in September, and they got, of course, I know they must have had to clear out all the mines and et cetera for us to land and get the troop ships to us to load on. And remember that day very vividly. The Red Cross was there as we left Mindanao and got on board ship, and they had Coca-Cola. Of course, that was ice cold Coca. It was unheard of in those days, but we had warm Coca-Cola, and loaded onto the troop ship and headed for Japan. There was a terrific hurricane, though, between the Philippines and there, and we stopped at Okinawa for overnight, and my brother fought with the Marines in Okinawa, and kind of hoped that I might get to see him, but we were there just a short time. Then headed for Kuri, Japan. And as we approached the islands of Japan, we all said we were so thankful that we didn't have to invade that country, because it'd come right out of the sea, and it would have been such a disaster and loss of life by having to invade. And I was talking to a man whose uncle served in the engineers during World War II, and he said that they were building a 10,000 bed hospital, started it on Saipan for the casualties that they expected for that landing.
How did the Japanese people react when you came ashore at Kuri?
Well, as we made a tactical landing, we had our M1s but no ammunition, and we landed there early morning, tactical landing, and gathered as a company and marched in to the city of Kuri. And as we walked down to the streets where we were to be housed, there was a policeman in every block with a silver sword on his shoulder and his back turned to us. And we wondered why that was. He had his back turned to us, but later on we found out that was to show respect for us as we marched through the city.
I think you told me once that that first day the streets were deserted.
They were. And as we marched along, we saw the homes and buildings where the people lived. They were peeking out, but pulling the drapes and blinds, peeking out at us, and no doubt thought we were savages, and as they had probably been told. And so there wasn't a soul on the streets except us and those policemen.
And the next day you said it was completely different.
Yes, the next day was completely different. The people, you couldn't hardly walk for the people that gathered around us, the adults begging for cigarettes and the children chocolate. And
were they friendly or fearful?
so friendly. It was just amazing how friendly and they treated us, and never once did we fear that we were going to be harmed.
Did that surprise you that they were so
Yes, it
friendly
did.
so quickly?
We didn't know what to expect, of course. And so as the infantry always had on Saturday inspection and then a parade, and when they and you know that got to be a drag, but it was so it was such a proud moment, I think, for all of us when we got out on the parade field and marched to behind the band and playing the songs that band songs, and it made you feel so proud that even I had the feeling of my hair standing on the back of my neck to be part of that great army that the United States had to protect it.
How was it that you went to Hiroshima?
And then after that parade inspection, a guy driving a 6x truck came along, and he said, "Anybody want to go to Hiroshima?" And oh yeah, that sounded great. We never thought that. We didn't even know we were that close, but we were about a 30-minute drive from Curry to Hiroshima. And so we jumped in, held about 8 or 10 guys, and we jumped in the truck, and he drove us. And as we approached the city, we didn't see any destruction because we had 6-foot-high board fences all around the town, and so you could. But as soon as you got through that gate that we went through and looked back at that fence, it was just charred black on that side. On the other side, it was standing just like a normal fence. So it showed how the bomb behaved. And then we drove into the middle of the city and got out and saw all the things that it was so devastating. That I wore glasses, and as a kid I would go to the doctor's office, and he had these trays of lenses and empty frames that he'd say, "Is this better or is this better?" And so I saw that laying there, and it was just melted, the glass in the frame solid, but it was too large for me to pick up and bring back.
Now you knew that an atomic bomb had been dropped.
Yes.
But no one really knew what that meant. What were you and your fellow soldiers saying to each other as you saw all that devastation? Because you once told me it was as if a sledgehammer had hit the city.
Yes. As I wrote to my wife that night after I got back, I told her that it did look just like a sledgehammer. It taken a big sledgehammer, it had gone through the city and just broke everything in little pieces. Except the streetcars were blown off the tracks, burned. The tracks were all twisted and from the heat and the explosion. And the bridge over the river was about 4 foot high, I guess, and with partitions of pillars in between. And as we stood there and looked at that bridge, on the side that the blast came through, looked like it had sandblasted the bridge that very day. And on the other side, there was just like hundreds of years of dirt. So that shadow went across the bridge.
I know you've picked up some things that you've kept as souvenirs all these years. Can you tell us what's in your display box?
Yes, the first thing I picked up was the sake bottle. That's a sake bottle, and you can see how it was melted and twisted and skidded along the ground, and some of the dirt at the bottom of the bottle, and I've never washed it since and it was easy for me to get that, and these aluminum coins that show how the blast affected them.
Melted them.
Just melted them, and it just was so devastating to everything. And
were your other soldiers that you were with also picking up mementos?
I think so, but every guy went by themselves,
Sure.
kind of.
Sure.
We all went different directions. Would you want me to tell about the piece of
If you wouldn't mind. I know
Yeah.
it's a little grisly, but it's...
And I was walking along, I saw this piece of skull it had been a lady because it had long black hair as the Japanese women had. And here was just the piece of skull by itself with this covered with this long black hair. That was a mystery to me how the bomb behaved in that way. Obviously, she was blown to bits, but there was that skull laying with the hair on it.
You wrote your wife that day, I think, when you got back to camp, and I think that's part of your display. What did you tell her about, I think you talked about the future now that you had seen atomic weapons. What did you tell her?
I told her that it was so devastating that I would hate to see any city in our country have to suffer the loss of life and damage that caused at that time, and hoped and prayed that it would never happen in this country.
I know that later in your life, after you came back to Pueblo, you actually became a correspondent, a pen pal of sorts with a former Japanese soldier.
I surely did.
Who had also fought in the Philippines.
Yes.
What was that experience like?
Well, the reason I found out, he said he remembered the day we invaded at Zamboanga, because that was the same night that the general ordered the firebombing of Tokyo.
The Americans, right.
Yes, and they used the B-29 bombers for that. And there were more people killed in that firebombing at Tokyo than there was at Hiroshima. Right. And so he came, I have a division paper that showed him, picture him with the Filipinos in Zamboanga. He came back from Japan to apologize to them that how the Japanese had treated them. And so I got his address and started writing to him, and we corresponded for 5 years back and forth. And it was amazing how our lives were very similar. He had grandchildren that played the piano in recitals as I did, and he had a beagle dog as we had for our kids. And I also asked him how he was treated as a prisoner of war. Because I said to him, or I wrote to him that the Japanese were, if you got captured, you usually got beheaded. Right. Or if you got wounded, they warned us about calling for the medic because they would hear the cries and find you and finish you off. And so he said that he went back to Tokyo after 2 years. That's before the U.S. could get any ships to take those POWs home. But he went to where his parents lived, and there's nothing but the foundation there, and they were killed in that bombing.
One last question, Mr. Elson. Do you have any doubts in your mind whether dropping the bomb was necessary?
Oh, absolutely, and praise President Truman for making that decision, and his staff, because we would have had millions of casualties on both sides. We were told that, well, the firebombings didn't stop the Japanese from wanting to continue the war, only because there were 6 warlords and they were divided. 3 of them wanted to stay and fight, and the other 3 didn't because they had such loyalty to Japan. But the emperor stepped in and said, I think we've had enough and we're going to quit. And so it was a great blessing that happened, because we were also told that if we had landed, the women and children would have long bamboo poles sharpened on one end, and they called them spider holes. And as we would pass by, they would come out of those spider holes and ram the GI in the back with those, and fight to the last woman and child. They would never, and that proved, because the Japanese, there were very few of them taken prisoner during the war in the Pacific.